it stems back from my job. The Japanese, with Toyota being a Japanese company, they have a certain way of like teaching you to troubleshoot problems, continuous improvement. They preach that all the time. Like if there's something that happens, they want you to ask why until you cannot ask why anymore. And that's what started everything. So I kind of applied that to deer hunting.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. We've been doing the podcast now for over 8 years, so we've had a pretty long track, of putting out episodes, having listener success stories, and every once in a while, the student becomes the master, and we get a listener on here who just absolutely shows us how it's done. And today we have just that with Mr. Brandon Gowan. Brandon, what's up?
How y'all doing? I appreciate it.
I'm doing great. Looks like you're doing really good. There's literally a pile of antlers in front, like just... All of these bucks are hammers that you've killed in, the last 2 years?
Yes.
Dude. That's the last 2?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
The 7-point was actually the first one I killed 3 years ago, but the rest of them, the last 2 years.
Dude, I'm talking about, you might need to take one of our places as host of this podcast. Check out
one of us, you on the cutting block now.
No.
The chopping block.
Yeah, I guess it would be me after this year. It's been rough, or after last year's season.
Yeah.
Jacob, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It makes me feel even better when you're sitting here. Of course, Brandon, it's good to see you again because we've seen you you've been to at least one Weavers meetup. Have you been to the first? Did you go to the first one we had?
I went to the second.
Okay.
And then I seen y'all at the Deer Expo in Birmingham.
Yeah, okay. So we've met you before, but I haven't seen any of your deer in person, but I feel even better now. I've seen a bunch of big rack bucks right here in front of us. So are you holding up?
Yeah, just there's one of them.
I killed that one last year on New Year's Day.
Yeah, I love how his main beams just shoot straight up like that. Golly, that's a hammer, dude. Why can't I run into any deer like this? We're going to find out today.
Yeah. It's like a little intervention.
Yeah, seriously. All right, so Brandon, give us a little background on yourself, man.
Basically, I'm 41 years old. I live in Madison County. I work at a Toyota motor manufacturing plant. I do weekend night maintenance shift. So basically, I work Saturday night through Monday night, and then I have Tuesday through Friday to go hunting. My wife and the kids, they're very understanding, and they allow me to kind of chase these deer around. So if it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't be able to kill half these deer.
That's awesome. So we had this big thing earlier this fall about career choices.
Yes, that's what I was going to bring up.
All right, explain to me your career, because that sounds like a really good hunting schedule, honestly.
That's why I took it.
Man's got his priorities straight.
Yeah.
Basically, we do machine maintenance, CNC, lathes, grinders, stuff like that. Well, they opened up a weekend reliability where we go around and PM all the machines, grease them, change belts, just look for problems, stuff like that. You can actually get like a 2-year degree, and Toyota will actually pay for you to go get this degree to be a maintenance technician. So there's a lot of kids that will get a job at Toyota, get in the program. They pay them to go to school and give them on-the-job training, and then once they get through and get their degree, they hire them.
Dude.
So it's a very good career
You make
choice.
a good living, and you get time to hunt during the week.
Yes.
When everyone else is at work.
Yes.
Which, based off GPS data that we've had, talked to Bronson Strickland about.
MSU Deer Lab GPS studies. We've done a couple podcasts on it.
That is the best time to hunt, specifically on pressured land, whether it's public or hunting club or lease, is middle of the week or during the week. And it's that's when the deer kind of go back to their normal patterns compared to the weekend. So that's awesome. Oh, wow.
That's it, dude. That's it. Career choices.
So yeah, any
That's half the battle. If you're gonna kill big bucks, you gotta have the right job. Honestly,
you gotta have the time and the schedule will make that happen. That's super cool.
Everyone send that to your 18-year-olds that are about to graduate high school.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, Brandon, I want to talk to you about, first off, how did you even become a listener of the podcast? Like, what kind of, because you were telling us that a little bit earlier, but like, what even happened with that? And then kind of walk us through what you were doing hunting wise before, and then starting to hear from some of these guests and kind of start applying different things.
So I've always kind of hunted private land. Well, I lost my private land, and I worked with a guy, and he was talking about he didn't have a place to hunt. So I was like, man, there's a lot of public by my house, but I've never set foot on it, never had the need. And he was like, man, let's go. So we got together, started looking, aerial photos, stuff like that. We bought a boat where we could get access to property, and we kind of started hunting it. Well, he found a better job and left. So here I am high and dry by myself. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to have to get in shape. So I start going to the gym, and I'm like, if I'm doing this for hunting, I'd really like to listen to hunting while I'm doing this to kind of motivate me. So I'd listen to different podcasts, but they was like, Ohio, Illinois. So I started looking for hunting in Alabama, and you guys popped up. Well, at the time, y'all had about close to 500 episodes. And the more I listened, I started looking through y'all's podcast for different stuff to kind of help me. Because I kind of evaluated myself and was like, well, I kind of struggled during like early season. So I started looking for early season podcasts, feed trees, anything I could find to help me, kind of get an edge. Mm-hmm. So I've been listening for 3 years. I've hunted public for 4. The first year, me and my friend, we harvested a doe. That was it. The next year, I kind of spread out, found some different spots, and I was focusing on the feed trees because the areas that I found had a lot of white oaks. Well, it was a year to where it wasn't very good for the white oaks. Well, I found a particular piece of public that a lot of deer was traveling through, and it has like hardly no acorns, but there's crop fields on one side, there's like pastures on the other. It's just a good travel corridor. Well, I got lucky enough, and I killed the 7-point, and it was my first one that I killed on public, and it took me a while.
Yeah, grab. Where's he at again?
He's
right here in the middle.
Yeah, he's
pile of bones.
A wild-looking deer.
No, here, just kind of hold him up in front of your chest. Mm-hmm. And so that was your first deer you killed on public.
Yes,
that's a dandy of a first public deer. I mean, that's a great buck.
Well, I was tickled to death because that area. The public where I live at, it gets hunted a pretty good bit. And I was like, I don't know if I can really do this. You know what I mean? Like the private land, you put cameras out. Some people put corn, do food plots. Mm-hmm. You get pictures. Public's not like that at all. I mean, it's kind of hit or miss. You might have a deer pattern, and some guys move in and mess the whole thing up. So I was very fortunate and lucky to kill that deer. Well, the next year, there was a bumper acorn crop. And all the scouting I'd done the previous year, I knew the places I needed to go. So I run a lot of trail cameras. And by the cameras, I started finding these feed trees like Roy Cope was talking about the droppings and stuff.
Rick Cope.
Rick Cope.
Okay.
I'm horrible with names.
No, you're fine. But yeah, so feed tree guy.
Yes. And he's talking about the droppings, how this tree was hotter than the others because everywhere I went, there was white oak acorns. But I would find particular trees, and they was usually big, monster white oaks. I mean, bigger than this right here, and they'd be droppings. So I'd put a camera on it, and lo and behold, I was getting deer. Well, the one that you picked up earlier, I found him during bow season. And I seen him like twice, but I never could get on him with a bow to kill him. Well, I was like, maybe I can do it during gun season. Well, when gun season starts, these hunters started showing up, in which I kind of expected that because it's a place that's accessible, fairly easy if you got a boat. Well, there was another gentleman that was talking about hunting in off wind.
Travis
Yes.
Murray.
Yep.
So in my mind, when I seen that deer and the way he traveled through the mountains, I was like, I need to hunt this with some type of south wind. Per the cameras, he never come through there on a south wind. It was always on a north wind. The hunters would come in there on a south wind, but nobody showed up when they was a north wind. So basically, the way he traveled around through there, I picked out a spot to where I could kind of cut him off, but I was just off from where he could get my scent. And sure enough, it just lined up. New Year's Day, shot him. He come around there. Actually, there was a big 5-point that come around the mountain first, and I thought it was him till I seen his rack. And then he worked his way through, and then like 20, 30 minutes later, he come the same way. They had to be a doe or something that come through there, pulled him through, and I was able to harvest him.
Man, that's a fantastic buck. I see you got your little score marks on here.
That's from Weaver's.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, what did he come out to?
118.
Okay, dude.
Awesome.
Dude, his mass carries all the way out.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was telling you a minute ago, I'm like, that's the kind of deer I'm looking for. I want something, as Tiff would say, with some big, thick antlers. Big, thick ones. Dude, okay. So this was your second public deer? Okay.
Yes.
Off to a super strong start, my man. That's for and that same year.
Yes. So then, like I said, I like running the cameras, and I found different areas that had a lot of white oaks. Well, this one we was getting pictures of.
Pick them up while you're talking about them.
So we got pictures of this one, and I'd been hunting a couple other places, and I'd go hunt here, and I wouldn't see him. Well, I'd go hunt another place, and he would show up. And it was pretty much the same thing. He would come in there on a particular wind. I would hunt it on another wind, and he would never show up. Well, this one I killed February, I want to say like the 6th is when I killed this one.
Really?
Yes.
How late? How post rut is that for you guys? Is it post rut?
Yes. They usually, in this particular area, around Christmas time, the rut is fire. And then whatever doesn't get bred, into January, first part of February, it starts back up.
Right.
But basically, there was like a ridge, and there was like a ditch on each side of it. And I'd found where the deer had been traveling around this ridge and crossing these ditches. And there was another, some private land that he was kind of coming in and out of a good bit. Well, I hunted one day, hunted all day, and seen like 15 deer, no bucks. And I was like, well, I'm going to hunt tomorrow morning. Same thing. Seen a bunch of does that morning, and next thing I know, the does just start running like crazy, and here he comes out chasing them around, and I was fortunate enough to get a good shot on him. I shot him at like 100 yards through the mountains and everything on like a flat headed towards that ditch. I didn't even know if I hit him or not. My friend was with me, and he's like, was that you that shot? And I was like, yeah, I don't know if I hit him. I was like, he run down in the ditch, but I never seen him come on the other side. And I was like, well, I'm going to ease down there. And sure enough, I eased down there, and he fell behind a log. And I seen the horn sticking up like this. And I was like, wow. But that was that one. And it was...
So that's your third public land deer?
Yes.
Okay.
Third.
God. So let me ask you, just with those first 3 deer, remind me again, you said you've been hunting public for 4 years.
Yes.
How early into the 4 years was all that happening?
I really didn't pick up. The first year, I didn't run a lot of cameras. The second year, I put out a lot of cameras I would find sign. We would scout, and if I found historical sign, I'd put a camera on it because there was a reason they was there at one time. If I found scrapes, put a camera on it. And I was just trying to narrow down where, was this a deer I'd be interested in hunting? Is this nighttime sign? Is this daytime? You know, just trying to figure out a pattern, something just to help me get them. And I started that the second year, and I've done it the next couple of years, you know, and just kind of built upon it. But the second year is when it really started like taking off, far as like, I think it had more to do with the acorn crop than anything. I've noticed on a lot of the properties, public especially, that I run the cameras, there'll be a good deer on there when there's a lot of acorns, and you'll have a lot of deer activity. The next year, if there's not a good acorn crop, there's still deer activity, but the good deer, they're not there. So it's kind of like you have to find areas to where they're at. And I actually found a particular area where I killed a 7-point. When there's no acorns, the deer just funnel through there going from that pasture to that crop field. When there's acorns, you might get like 3 or 4 pictures the whole season. They just don't come through there. They stay where the food is.
Okay, very cool. Now, also, I want to talk about, because we have more deer here I want to kind of hear stories on, but before we get to that, I want to understand more about what else kind of clicked for you and started giving you confidence. I know running trail cameras is a big aspect, which I want to get into, like how are you using that to build not only confidence in areas, but also like timing of when you should hunt. But before that, what else were like some takeaways that kind of, maybe because when you were hunting private land, it wasn't like a thought, but when you get to public land, like the pressure and everything, maybe change your perspective of how you should approach some of that?
That was the hardest learning curve, because like on private land, the pressure's kind of controlled. You know, people have spots that they like to hunt, and you know where they're going to go and stuff like that. On public, you have no idea who's been in there or what, and you'll have pictures of a buck, and then the next thing you know, like he disappears, and you're like, what happened? And then you start kind of scouting, searching around, and then you find somebody's tree stand, or you find where somebody made a mock scrape or something like that. But as far as the private land, you know, most people, sign, it'll lie to you as far as like rubs and scrapes. Tracks will not lie. And I heard Michael Perry say that one time in one of his episodes. So what gave me the most confidence is when I would find an area and I found big tracks, I really started trying to hone in on it, because if you find big tracks, that's an older, heavier deer, they're probably going to have better headgear. And that's probably about the biggest thing. The difference between the private and the public is I started paying more attention to the tracks. Because, I mean, I would find rubs and scrapes, but I'd put a camera on it, and it would be some deer that, I mean, they was respectable, but it was nothing I wanted to spend time on. And then, like, far as private, you know, the cameras we run and everything, there was just more deer, better deer, and it was a lot less competition. So you kind of knew, you know, hey, if I leave this alone, maybe till like the rut, I can go in here and kill this deer. And if nobody else bothered it, usually that's what happened.
So now explain to me how you started implementing trail cameras, and how have you made any adjustments to trail cameras? Like, what are you trying to learn from your trail cameras? You talked about nighttime versus daytime sign, but how did you implement trail cameras to start also building confidence, like picking up on the public land?
So with the trail cameras, basically I find sign, trails, scrapes, rubs, and if it was something that I thought like in the area I would like to hunt, I would put a camera on it. And basically I would wait to see what showed up, if it was daytime, nighttime, like that. The biggest thing with the trail cameras, they gave me a lot of information as far as like dates and stuff. Like I started noticing on my private land when we run cameras, we basically did it to keep up with deer as they evolved every year and grew and everything, to like we would name them, and next year, you know, old Slant 8's bigger this year. Well, we noticed, and I didn't know this till I started listening to y'all, and y'all had the Daniel Williams podcast. I would compile all the pictures, especially of the bucks, and like the next year, running cameras, I get more pictures, and I noticed that, hey, this buck's kind of in this area on the same date. So I kind of made like an Excel spreadsheet and like pretty much put like Slant 8, you know, this area on this date. Well, the next year, within 3 days of that date, either him or another buck that I would possibly consider shooting would show up. So I didn't know until the Daniel Williams podcast that I was doing the same thing he was, and he had the simpler method by using the calendar. Here I am compiling pictures and all this other stuff on my laptop, using all this memory. So with that was one reason why I wanted to run the cameras on public too, to see if these bucks kind of had these same annual patterns. But not all signs the same, but the tracks is definitely the thing to go by. But with the trail cameras, if they're showing up consistent, you know, I would kind of plan, you know, how to hunt a certain area if it was a buck I wanted to hunt.
What do you like to run your trail cameras on specifically?
Well, I do photos. I just need to know what it is. Is he an 8-point? You know, is it nighttime or daytime? If it's daytime, If he's there 30 minutes before daylight or 30 minutes after dark, I'm going to be in that area somewhere trying to find how he's using it. I would like to run the video, but I just haven't found a trail camera yet that I can run enough of that's affordable enough to run the videos.
Now, also, are you running mostly on scrapes, trails, rubs, access points? Like, what do you have? Kind of have cameras set up on that you feel like gives you the most confidence of catching a buck daylighting out there?
They're kind of all equal, but I run it on anything I find that a deer lays down. I put it on it. Far as like a trail, I want to find somewhere where it's kind of soft to where like I can tell the tracks, and I'll put a camera on that. Scrapes, especially if I find a historical rub line, I like to put cameras on that too, and it just depends if they're using it or not.
You're talking about finding where the ground is kind of soft.
Mm-hmm.
So, because sometimes you'll find, especially if you're up in the hills where it's rockier, you'll find that big deer trail running around the side of a hill, and you'll put a camera on it, and you'll get one deer on it a month.
Yes.
It's like, oh, they've just been walking this for like 20 years probably, and they've just worn out a trail, but they don't walk it that often, right?
I like to find like a ditch in the mountains, and I'll walk that ditch from the bottom to the top of the property that I can walk and find somewhere where they're crossing. And usually that's, from the runoff, the silt that builds up, you'll find tracks right there. And I'll basically put a camera somewhere in a transition area like that where they're crossing the ditch, or if they cross up to somewhere it pinches them down, I'll put the camera there.
I want to keep talking about trail cameras, but I want to back up just a little bit and talk about when you were starting to find these deer and be successful in public. There's a lot of public land where you're from. Mm-hmm. How are you narrowing down where to go and start scouting? Were you looking at maps and looking for certain habitat features that you were keying in on? Like what was telling you that there might be a good buck in this area or that area?
Well, the second year that I was hunting public and I started listening to the podcast about the feed trees and stuff like that, trying to evolve my hunting resume, I guess you would say, I was using the Onyx feature where it would show like the white oaks and mass crops. So that's the areas that I focused on because I was trying to improve my early season game. And if there was good acorns, I'd find sign and I would put cameras out and these deer would show up. So it wasn't like so much terrain features. It was more like the food as far as the acorns and stuff. I was kind of keying in on that because I've always been able to, if you find the deer and you follow them around, because they'll feed through the mountains, they're going to eat the food out and move to the next area. So I would always keep up with the does, and I've always been, I would say, a rut hunter. That's like my forte. And as long as you keep up with the does, once they come in rut, you know where they're at. You just got to sit there daylight to dark, and you can do it. But from the previous year scouting, I would go hunt an area, hunt till like 9, 10 o'clock. I would get down and I'd walk till dark. And if I found a big group of white oaks, if I found any type of sign, if I found where hunters had been, I would mark it. And I just kind of put all that on the map, and then I would look at it and be like, well, there's hunters in this area. There's a lot of white oaks here or stuff like that. And that's kind of where I started focusing because I was trying to improve my early season game. And it just kind of led on to later on in the year, these deers happened to be in these areas.
Hey guys, it's Jake. We got a quick tip for you in this podcast. One thing I've been working on over the last year is trying to figure out how to be less bulky really while saddle hunting and mobile whitetail hunting. And the biggest issue I always had was I really liked really large packs, and the problem was outside of certain points of the season, like when it got really cold, I never used the full capacity of some of those really big backpacks. And one thing I started doing is using a smaller pack that has a lot more expandable capacity, so you can still pack a lot of stuff if you need to, but it's also very streamlined. It's super easy to go in and out of the woods with, especially during early season or just when you're not packing a lot of cold weather gear. This is the Latitude Ranger 22. I used this all last season, and I could pack a surprising amount of gear in that pack, specifically a bunch of cold weather gear, both bibs, jackets, extra layers, along with a platform, or when I was hybrid hunting with a small little lock-on, having a small lock-on on here as well, along with my sticks. And this backpack works really well with that. So if you're in the market for a new backpack and you're trying to streamline what you're doing, I'd really highly recommend looking at the Ranger 22 from Latitude Outdoors. And you can check out the Ranger 22 at latitudeoutdoors.com.
All right, guys, we're out here today. Got a little in the field tip for you. We're scouting this fresh clear cut. I think this was cut sometime in the spring. We identified this using onX's recent imagery layer. This image is about 2 weeks old. They update this every 2 weeks, so you're getting brand new satellite images. So we were able to find this beautiful clear cut. I mean, look at this. This looks like where a lot of big bucks get killed in the South in rifle season. So we're actually using this tool along with the topo map to walk and look at this low spot over here to see if we can find a good rifle setup for when the rut comes in a couple weeks. So we're gonna walk over there and check that out. In the meantime, if you want to access this or any of the other features available with the onX Elite membership, use the promo code SOUTHERN and you can get 20% off.
Hey guys, it's Jake from the podcast. Got a quick tip for you when it comes to turkey calling, especially if you're a newer turkey hunter that's not as experienced, and that is using covert calling that we learned from Coach Ron Waters last year out of Alabama. And that's what helped us kill 9 birds in Alabama between 3 of us. And again, a lot of those on public land. You don't have to be a great caller like I mentioned, and all it is super soft calling at like a 20 to 30, maybe 40% volume level when it comes to calling. I really like a friction call to do that, doing soft clucks, purrs, and yelps. So working that in along with scratching the leaves worked extremely well for me last year, along with my brother Thomas, and then even Andrew. So again, covert calling can really work for you. It's also nice to have a call that you have a lot of control over, especially at lower volume levels. And that's where the Dixie Hen custom ceramic pot call from Houndstooth Game Calls really works out great for me. I love this call. Again, it helped me kill 8 birds in Alabama, or be part of 8 birds dying in Alabama, 4 from me and 4 from Thomas. And then Andrew also killed one using the Dixie Hen custom ceramic. If you want to check it out, go to houndstoothgamecalls.com and use the code SOUTHERN25 for a discount on your order. Really love these calls, guys. I think you'll enjoy it too this spring.
I want to go back to trail cameras. Looking at all the different types of sign you put a camera on, do you, just kind of looking back and kind of thinking in your mind, is there any one type, or whether it's terrain feature, buck sign, trails, whatever, that seem to give you more consistency on getting buck inventory and also potentially more daylight photos than other ones?
Yes, terrain features.
Terrain features.
So I didn't know this either till I started listening to podcasts, but Bobby Worthington, long range funnels, short range, soft funnel, or soft pinch points, hard like that. So on the private land, we had 2 parcels that we could hunt, and we would put cameras out on both. And you would have, say, a particular buck back here in this area, like on a Friday. Well, Saturday morning, he showed up on the other property. And we was like, man, that's, cool. He traveled this whole long distance. Well, comes to find out it's a long range funnel. And we didn't know that. We just thought he was just, traveling a lot. Well, year after year, where we would get these pictures, we'd keep putting the cameras there, and lo and behold, different bucks would show up. So I try to stick with the terrain features, but if I find scrapes, rubs, whatever, I'm putting a camera on it just to see, because there's a reason they was there. It might have been at night, might have been at day. But as far as hunting, if you can find a terrain feature that will pinch them down to where you know that if they're in this particular area, they're going to come in this area, it's helped me a lot as far as harvesting deer. Because when I hunted private, my early 20s, we'd find a big white oak flat. And, man, we would hunt, and they'd be rubs and scrapes, and you'd sit there from daylight to dark, and you wouldn't see a deer. Well, when they come out with cameras, we'd put them on it, and then we figured out, hey, they're coming here at night and feeding. Well, then we started, looking for other places, the terrain features, how they was getting there, and we just kind of started backing off, and by the cameras, it showed us that, hey, they're traveling through here during the day to get there at night to feed.
So the terrain features are the more consistent areas you get bucks on daylight.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
Is there any one particular terrain feature that's better than another one? Because you've mentioned ditches and some other things, but is there any one that stands out?
Well, I like to find like a ridge that runs down the mountain. It doesn't have to be a long ridge. It could be anything. And if it'll have like a ditch on each side of it, from what I have found, those deer love to come around the point of that ridge down off the mountain and cross that ditch. One way or the other, they're going to go around that ridge and cross that ditch. So you can jack up on the ditch right there and just watch down it, and you can cut them off. And for me, that is the one terrain feature that most of these bucks, I have killed them going towards the ditch or coming, out of the ditch, going around those ridges.
So the ridge point. So like if your arm is the ridge, you're talking about where the tips of your fingers.
So like, take my finger for instance. You'll have like a ditch on this side and a ditch on this, and the ridge goes off, and
your finger being the ridge.
Yes. They will come around one way or the other and cross the ditch, like going up the mountain or going down the mountain, from what I have found. Usually, like if you break the mountain in thirds, from what I've seen, that second third, somewhere in between there is where I find that they like to cross those ridges on those ditches. I haven't had much luck with that low, like the bottom third, but the second third, I usually have good luck there.
Okay, I got you. Is that early season or is that just any time?
Anytime.
Because I ended up having luck with that. I've had luck with it actually pretty close to where you live, but this year in particular, or last season in particular, North Carolina, where we were hunting those ridge points, and that's where I was seeing at least does I was seeing. They just love like popping around, and it's a really good place to ambush a deer because they're coming around that ridge point, and there you are. It's like standing around the corner of the side of a building.
Right.
You're going to scare someone, That's what it's like with that ridge point, and that's a good terrain feature. So are you just running up and down those ridge points and trying to find a scrape on that ridge point?
Anything. If I find rubs, scrapes, any of it, I'll start looking for a trail to see if it goes around, if it crosses, just wherever I can throw a camera up.
Dude, I just realized that buck I was showing you, I got all kinds of bucks on camera last year in a spot exactly like what you're talking about, and it just dawned on me because it's a ridge point, long ridge point that comes down, and it's not off the very end of the ridge point. What I did is I got way up on the bigger ridge, ran down this ridge point, and about half, right smack in the middle of it, maybe a little bit closer to the bottom. It's kind of steep, and then it levels out, and then it drops off. There's like the end of the ridge.
Yes.
Right where it goes from being steep to leveling out, there was just a scrape right there, like not a very big scrape, about the size of the seat cushion that you're sitting on. And then there's a secondary scrape next to it, and there's a trail coming down, crosses about 5 yards past them. I put a camera on it in like September, immediately started getting bucks on it. And I've had probably 9 or 10 different rack bucks, and 5 of them are hammers. I mean, like really nice deer. And what they always do, it seems like they're always angling, and they're usually not walking the trail. The bucks are not usually walking the trail. They're angling and they're hitting it. And I went in there during the rut this past season, and there's like a faint trail that cut through there, and it goes and it crosses that ditch, and it goes up on the side of the mountain. So they kind of angle up where the does are running straight up and down the ridge point, and it seems like the bucks are angling off, crossing that ditch, and just veering off, doing their own thing. They're going up into some really steep mountain laurel stuff. Is that what you're seeing?
Yes. It's like the bucks are coming around kind of scent tricking, especially later on in the season. That was the one thing, like I said, the cameras that I picked up on pretty quick is when I would find those faint trails and stuff like that coming around, you would see the big tracks. And sure enough, you put a camera on it and you'd have something show up.
Interesting. Okay. And that's now with the bucks, do you see that early season or in the rut? Like I'm talking them cutting those trails like we're talking about.
Early season, they would come through there some, but not like later in the season. It seems like from where I'm at, some of the public, the rut starts around December. So like the end of November up into December, you'll start seeing that activity on those cameras. Early season, it's more like if you find where they're feeding at, kind of trails going to that, you'll catch them on that.
Okay, I got you.
Also, do you like setting up when you're hunting around those ditches and everything where these bucks are crossing? Do you like to get above or below where they cross at?
Depends on the wind. If I'm giving them the wind, I will actually try to not get above or below, but get in line with them and back off from it to where I'm watching it, because as long as they don't smell me and I know they're coming that way, I would rather, be off from it facing them instead of up or down from them, because I'm afraid that the wind might swirl, because in the mountains, you never know. The thermals and everything, the further I can get off, especially with a gun, the more confidence I have.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm trying to reanalyze some spots I've hunted in the past too. I'm like, interesting. The going back into, kind of talking about some of these deer and what's kind of worked for you. Again, like terrain's been huge for you. Finding the crossings, finding the tracks, all that. What buck was it that you killed that really clicked for you of like, this is the pattern that I need to kind of stick with and not jump around and do a bunch of other stuff that maybe isn't as effective for you? Like when you started finding the crossings, was there any one of these bucks that when you killed them, you're like, okay, I'm starting to see the pattern, I'm actually getting the results, and this is actually working for me?
The 9 that Andrew picked up, when I killed that one, that really brought my confidence up, because he was in that same terrain feature the way he was coming around. And lo and behold, the 8 was in another, just pretty much set up the same way, except where this ridge run north to south and the ditches, pretty much run north to south also. This other way, the ridge run east to west and the ditches run north to south. But when I killed the 9, that kind of was like, okay, there's something to this. And then when I killed the 8, I was like, this is working. And then I went to another property that had the same setup and killed the other 9.
Also, when you're scouting some of these places, are you doing this postseason, during season, summer scouting? When do you seem to scout and have the most success finding some of these spots?
Usually after season is when I like to go and everything, because I'll leave my cameras out for about a month after season just to see what made it. And then I'll go hit up areas, and if I saw a lot of deer come from a particular place, I'm going to go over there and walk around and see why, Before, it was like the second year, I'd done a lot of, like, I would go just hunt an area. If I seen a deer, that was great. If not, so be it. And then I scouted. I mean, I wore the boot leather out, because there's no replacement for scouting, in my opinion. A good friend of mine told me, he worked a construction job, so anytime it rained, he would go scout. And he told me a good rule of thumb is scout 3 days, hunt 1. And he's like, whatever sign you find, wherever the best sign is, that's where you need to go hunt. So I've kind of took that to heart, and the second year I done all the scouting, and then the third year I kind of had ideas of places I wanted to put cameras and see, and it was more like kind of monitoring those areas, hunting others, and kind of doing a little bit of scouting and just using the trail camera data to, really decide where I was going to hunt at.
Is bedding ever a factor for you about finding or locating bedding, or is it more just travel corridors?
Travel corridors. The private property that I have, there's a place that they bed at that I know. A lot of the public places, I haven't found a whole lot of bedding areas. It's more like they just travel through there. But I have found a couple of places, but it's very few and far between.
See, I'll say my opinion on that. I almost feel like a piece of public that sets up more so for travel than bedding, to me, is almost easier to hunt, because if you bump a deer, to me, that's not nearly as critical if it's in a travel corridor versus in a bedding area that you got to like slip by to try to get in the hunt. Mm-hmm. I don't know your thoughts on it, but it seems like a lot of those properties are setting up, like you're saying, it's just travel corridors. Yes. So you can kind of go through there, you bump a deer, it's no big deal, because there's going to be other ones working through there.
Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of times like the travel corridor, I'll come in there and hunt in the morning and know they're going to come through in the evening. Just then, just to be there. That way I don't bump them or something like that. But yeah, most of the time, if I run a deer out of there, I'm not too worried about it, unless that buck's coming through there like early in the morning. Then yeah, I'm in my mind, I'm like, I messed up,
What? Let me ask you this. After you've been now hunting public for about 4 years and having some success, some really good success, killing some great deer, what now gets you excited about, because you still have access to some private land now, What gets you excited about the public land hunting, like just in general? And is there any difference in excitement there versus what you have on your private?
With the public, I mean, everybody against each other. There's a bunch of guys out there trying to kill these same deer that I'm trying to kill. So if I'm lucky enough to get it, that makes me get out of the bed in the morning, because I'm like, if I don't go, somebody might show up and kill him, and then I'll be all hurt about it and everything.
Well, also, because you mentioned like the 9-point you had history with, how many of these bucks that you've killed that's like laying here in front of us did you have history with and knew of?
So the last public land buck that I killed this year, this one I had pictures of him for 2 years, and I was able to harvest him this year.
Hammer.
The others was just from scouting the previous year, found the sign, and put up cameras just to see what was in there. Because the area that I killed this one in, after the season, there was 2 or 3 bucks that was like that buck in there. Mm-hmm. Run cameras kind of on the same terrain features. I haven't seen them this year at all.
So maybe I want to kind of clarify that question too. You answered it really good, but I also want to get a different point of it. How many of these bucks that you've killed did you already have on camera?
All of them.
All of them?
Yes.
Oh,
really?
Nice.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, so I bring that up because I've seen other people ask that question on social media, like how many bucks have you actually killed that you had on camera? And for some people, I've never heard of most of all the bucks they've killed they've had on camera, but kind of like 50-50 is kind of average, or sometimes it's like I've only killed 10% of what I've had on camera. Mm-hmm. But all of your bucks you've killed, you've had on camera.
Every one of these I can show you trail camera pictures of.
That's pretty okay. Well, okay, let me ask you this: why do you think that's the case? What do you think, based off how you're hunting, that you've had the success of actually killing bucks that you've had on camera? Because that's something a lot of people are wondering, like how you're being able to do that.
Luck.
I don't know, man. After this many, it kind of seems like luck might not be it.
Well, honestly, it's the time in the woods, because there's a bunch of days that I go hunt and I'm hunting for this specific deer. I don't see a deer, but I know he comes through there. I see his tracks. I see the sign. I got pictures. It's just if the conditions are right for him to come through there. So I'm going to hunt it. If I hunt it a couple of times and I don't see him, I'll leave it alone for a little while. If he shows back up, I'll try and maybe come up with a different way of accessing it or something like that to maybe throw him a curve that he's not expecting,
Okay, let me ask you this then. Still talking about trail cameras, which, by the way, audio listeners don't seem to mind the trail camera conversation.
The
YouTube guys get upset. It's a small minority, but God, they are so vocal about anti-trail cameras, which that's fine. They can have that opinion. But I do want to know, with trail cameras and your implementation of them and the success you've had killing bucks, like all these bucks you've had on camera, is there any kind of pattern you want to see on camera that gives you more confidence that you're going to have an opportunity at that deer versus another? Like how often in a week time span do you need to see them daylighting or anything like that? You feel super confident you can go kill that deer.
If I see them 2 or 3 times during the week, that deer's going to have some problems here in another week or two. There's a lot of them that if it wasn't for the annual data of running the cameras, that I wouldn't have been able to get them, because they show up like maybe in a month, like 2 times. Mm-hmm. So it's like you can go hunt the rest of the month, you're not going to see that deer. But that 8-point that I killed on public, this one, sure enough, I had pictures of him last year.
Hold him up just a little bit higher. There you go. There you go.
But I had pictures of him last year and on certain dates. And I always look at my calendar. Like, I'll check my pictures and stuff, but I'll look at my calendar too and be like, well, this area last year, it was kind of hot. So if I like hunting when it's colder, I don't have very good luck when it's warm. And far as pictures, I don't get as many on camera. If I do, it's more like nighttime, and it's just not as good. But that annual data on the ones that don't show up a lot is very deadly.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. How many bucks do you have annual data with that you've killed? That's laying here.
Well, just this one right here.
Just that one, okay. Mm-hmm. So but the annual data not only could work for individual buck, but more so tell you when mature bucks are kind of coming through an area?
The private land deer here, I hunted the property before, lost it for a couple of years, and then got access back to it. I already knew the times of the year, where to be and where to hunt. It was just what was going to be there. And that's basically how I killed them. I didn't have pictures of them previously, but I knew these times of the year, I need to be in these areas.
Show the one with the kickers and everything.
Yeah, that deer is a hammer.
And you're turn him around.
So tilt him down so you can see his back brow tines is what I'm going to call him.
Yeah.
I mean, just like extra brow tines sticking out the backside.
Yeah.
Are you bringing him to Weavers, getting him
Yes.
scored? You
Yeah.
you entering him in the big buck contest?
Yeah, I'm going to carry him, just see what he scores. I scored my own, and last year I sat there and watched the guy score, and I was pretty close. But, I would still like to have it officially scored just to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a phenomenal deer. Now, one thing I'm curious about, you've got trail camera history with all these deer. How are you locking down on these deer and confirming that you're on top of them? Like, you'll say, I'll go in here and I'll only hunt this specific deer, and so I don't see a lot of deer on those hunts. What do you have to see to be like, oh, I'm on him? This is where I need to be. I'm on him. Because I might get a picture of a buck. I'm just thinking about this past season. I might get a picture of some bucks at my club, and I'll get him every once in a while at night on like a big old scrape down in a thermal hub or something. So I'm like, I don't know if I'm on top of him or if he's walking a really long ways to get here or what. So what do you need to see?
Consistency on the camera. If
day or night?
Daytime.
Okay.
Nighttime, I'm going to start backtracking and going away from him a couple hundred yards, property lines permitting, and try and find something.
Okay. So this past season, to bring up another example, we had a deer like that where he was showing up on this hub scrape very consistently at night, like midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. He was there probably 3 or 4 days a week. I mean, all the time. You wake up in the morning, you check your camera, and you're like, yep, there he is. And we're like, I don't know how far he's coming. I went about 150 yards north of there, just 150 yards, and put a camera, found a little bitty scrape next to a draw that went up in a cutover, put the camera there, boom, got him in daylight, just like that. I mean, that week, him and actually there was two of them. There's two nice bucks using that scrape, both of them, and getting pictures of them at midnight and 1 a.m., you want to assume they're coming from a long ways off. No, he's like right there.
Yes.
And I'm like, he must just be milling around and we're catching him coming back up in there. I don't know. But have you seen the same thing where they're not usually as far as you think they are?
Yes. Basically, the first one I killed this year, we was getting pictures of him in a pasture and everything about 30 minutes after dark. And I had sent y'all some pictures of this buck before season, asking y'all how old y'all thought he was and stuff like that. I emailed them to y'all. Mm-hmm. And basically, this buck right here, we was trying to figure him out. I didn't get to hunt much during early season because of my mom and everything. But the youth hunt happened. And a friend of mine, he went and hunted, and I was with my son. And he was about a third of the way up the mountain. And he texts me and was like, hey, man, there's like 4 does in a spike headed y'all's way. And I'm like, okay. Well, 10 minutes later, they show up. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Well, the muzzleloader season starts, and I hunt another spot up on the mountain about 2/3 the way up. Well, I got some deer coming through and everything. Well, about 20 minutes later, they show up on that camera down there going to that pasture. And I'm like, huh. So this is, about 20 minutes away. So when we started getting consistent pictures of this buck showing up 30 minutes after dark, I was like, I need to be at this level up the mountain, and I need to find, sign. So the travel corridor where I was getting the pictures that I sent y'all of these two bucks, I was thinking, because the way this property sets up and everything, where we had the camera at the pasture, it was like shading the right-hand side of this mountain. I said, well, I'm going to go to the right-hand side up there. And years past, I killed a 150-inch deer in this area. So I was like, I know how they kind of come through there. I'm going to go hunt it. So basically, I picked out a day. It was like the high was like 40 that morning, and it was supposed to drop to like 4:30 that evening. I worked off that morning, slept a couple hours, and my buddy was like, man, I'll go with you. I'll hunt this down here at the pasture. And I said, well, I'm going to go way up on the mountain. It took me like an hour and 15 minutes to walk up there because basically a lot of times I don't like to walk straight to my area. I'll do like what I call like a J hook or a fish hook. I'll walk way up and around and drop down to a spot. So that's basically what I did. Man, I sit up there, 4 o'clock, nothing. 4:30, there's like squirrels raising cane. There's a hawk just having a field day with these squirrels, you know. And I'm like, man, this is no fun. You know, I thought for sure I had this figured out, you know. 4:45, I hear a squirrel barking, and I'm like, that's not the bark with a hawk, you know. I hear something walking, and I'm facing, with the way the wind was blowing, like I was telling you before, I wasn't above the terrain feature, I was facing it. Well, this buck, I got pictures of him before season on this terrain feature. After season started, the only place I got pictures of him was down there by that pasture. Well, I'm sitting in that stand and I hear walking. I kind of look to my left, can't see nothing. I look to my right, I can't see nothing. I'm like, he's walking in line with me. Well, walking's getting closer, you know, and I hunt out of a heater bodysuit. I can't do the cold. I'm going to stay warm, you know. But basically, I look and I see a pretty good sized body, and I seen it had horns. So I unzip my heater bodysuit. I stand up and turn around. We stopped behind a tree, and I could not see his head. I didn't know what he was, but I mean, he was in the wide open, like 50 yards, and I'm like, I'm not going to shoot him if he's one of these other deer that, you know, we're wanting to let grow. Well, he walks out. And I see those tines on the end, the G4s or whatever, and I said, oh, that's the Big 10, and I was able to take him. So he was using that area. He just wasn't showing up on the camera. He just moved, you know, like 50, 60, 100 yards over. He was still coming through there. He just wasn't on camera. And that's another thing that we've noticed. Just because you'll get pictures of them and you're not getting it consistently, they're still coming through there. It's just they're not walking in front of that camera, because if you put them up in a tree on public, I put my cameras like 12 foot up in a tree, and I kind of angle them down. It really cuts down on what you're seeing. So you only see just a small part, where if you had it on the ground, I might have picked him up coming through behind or something like that, you know.
Interesting. Yeah, that's actually one of the most in the last couple of years, that's one of my perspectives that has changed the most, because I think we talked about it before, but you always hear like, oh, if you got him in the middle of the night, he's coming from way off. And I think that's maybe more I would say Midwest, but just agricultural-based areas where there's much more limited cover and food and everything. But around here, I mean, most places in the Deep South, there's such an abundance of food and cover, they don't have to cover distances like that, unless that's just that buck's personality. So it's like, he doesn't have to walk 2 miles. When he walks 2 miles, he's past 35 different bedding areas, you know? It's not like he's got to go far to find different bedding areas. And that brings up another point. For your part of Alabama, do you have like a lot of logging up there or clear cuts? I'm curious about what your cover looks like.
Unless it's a big timber company, not a lot of logging. It's more like real steppy. You'll find some places it's kind of steep, but it is limestone rocks, cedars, and oaks and persimmon trees, like everywhere. So
that sounds awesome.
There's a lot of places that you can't hunt out of a tree stand. You got to sit on the ground, and he has to come through this certain spot on this area for you to get a shot. And if he don't come there, you might see him. You're not going to kill him unless you got like a cannon to shoot through cedars and all kinds of stuff. And that's one reason why, like, I use like a 300, because I've had to shoot through some stuff a couple of times just to, you know, try and have a shot.
Yep, the Lord's caliber.
That's right.
I thought it was a 45-70.
I don't know, man. That's where my mind went when you're talking about needing a brush gun. I'm like, 45-70, where you at? So another question too about, you know, this one's more about consuming podcasts and things like that to help yourself out. Like, you went and looked for a podcast that would help you and give you tips. And like I said, we've been doing this for 8 years now. I don't know what episode we're at. High 600s at this point. 600 episodes, and most of those are us interviewing people. You know, like Jacob and I, we're not the big buck killers. we're the doe and decent buck killers. But we interview guys who kill those upper echelon bucks across the Southeast, and we've talked to so many of them throughout the whole Southeast and even outside of the Southeast, and they're all a little bit different. And we've had listeners reach out to us about this, and we've talked about it amongst ourselves too, that when you drink from that fire hose and you listen to that many different perspectives where it's like this guy over here is killing top tier bucks for his area and he does one thing, and this guy over here is also killing top tier bucks in the same area and he's doing something that completely contradicts what the other guy does. When you're drinking through that fire hose, if you try to do too much of each one, it'll screw you up. And me and Jacob have definitely suffered from that in the past, where we want to try this, then we want to try that, and we want to try this, and you never get good at one thing. So being someone who went and looked for the content, consumed it, and applied it successfully, what's your perspective on that?
Well, I didn't just like pick a certain way out. Basically, and it stems back from my job. The Japanese, with Toyota being a Japanese company, they have a certain way of like teaching you to troubleshoot problems, continuous improvement. They preach that all the time. Like if there's something that happens, they want you to ask why until you cannot ask why anymore. And that's what started everything. So I kind of applied that to deer hunting and myself. So with the podcast, I was kind of like, okay, let's just say like the guy with the scrapes. How will that work in the areas that I hunt? It's not like I was going to do exactly what he did. I just kind of thought like how I could use what he was doing to benefit me. And I might not be able to do everything that he did, but I might take just bits and pieces and just see. It's trial and error. It is the best way to do it. But whereas I can hunt, 3 or 4 days a week, and where like a normal person that works, they get a day or 2 days, I can try more things than not be successful and have more success.
Time to recover.
Yes.
How do you ask yourself why in the situations when you're not successful? Because again, you hunt a lot. There's a lot of days I'm sure you don't see any deer, or you don't see the buck you're after. How do you work through, ask yourself why? Like, why did I see this deer? Why did I not see this deer? Why did this? I thought this area was going to work out, but it didn't. What goes through your head in those situations? Because we preach on the podcast all the time about asking why. Like, that's how you learn. If you keep doing the same thing over and over,
Yes.
hoping something else happens, that's the definition of insanity. Okay. So explain your thought process and how you apply that in the field.
A lot of people assume like a deer is coming through this area this way or something like that. When I ask why, I want some type of physical, a photo, a scrape, a rub, a track, something to tell me that this is why this is happening, not just because I want him to do this, because there's a lot of people that hunts where they want deer to be instead of hunting where the deer actually are. So when I would ask why, I'd be like, well, why didn't that deer come through here today? I would be like, well, was it because of the wind? Was it the way that I walked in and everything? And if I couldn't come up with physical evidence on it, I just assumed that, hey, he just wasn't here today. I'll come back tomorrow and see how it happens.
Okay. Yeah, because I know you have some buddies that hunt with you, and you have some people maybe you're kind of like mentoring that you're trying to like help them, kind of get it on their own path of like killing deer. How do you have that? Do you have any kind of conversation like that with them about the why and like learning? And like, if so, like, how do you have that conversation with them? Try to teach them that aspect of asking why and thinking, through that process.
Well, my dad told me a long time ago when I was a little runt, he was like, you can learn something from anybody. He's like, you just got to be smart enough to realize if they're BSing you or, if it's actually going to work. So I always ask somebody their opinion. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I'm trying to get you to think a certain way. So I'll ask questions or what do you think? And then if they tell me something that is different from what I'm kind of thinking, I'm like, well, how did you come up with that? And then I'm like, well, okay, he saw this and it made him think that like the deer was coming through here this time of day or something like that. So it's more just you got to kind of be confident. That you've said this a lot on the podcast, you know, if you believe in the moon, you know, it makes you confident, use it. So you kind of got to have a belief and believe in yourself that like if I'm doing this and it's working, hey, it's working, you know. Friends of mine, I've got family, friends that I'll ask them all the time, hey, what do you think about this? Just to get an idea of like what they think. And there's a lot of guys that I know that's way better hunters and killers than me that I'll run stuff by them and they'll be like, you know, yeah, I'd probably do that. Or they're like, no, I think I would do this. So it's more just like having a conversation to where like, if you know for a fact that this deer is doing this and they can kill it, you might try and lead them in the conversation to where they get that kind of on their self. Because if you tell somebody how to do something, they're not going to learn it. But if they kind of, you know, the wheels click and they kind of figure it out themselves, they're more likely to remember it and do it and, you know, kind of evolve or grow from that.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was gonna say. Is that's a really good perspective of it, because that's one thing that you learn. I'll be a great example. Mila's house I bought. My dad's been helping me remodel some of it, and a lot of times he's like, "Oh, you need to do this, you need to do that," like working on different things. I'm like, I'm kind of just like the podcast asking why, because like I want to try to figure out, because a lot of this stuff I've never done before, and it's like you learn so much more. I feel like instead of someone telling you, well, you do this, you do this, you do that, asking why we're doing it a certain way and then kind of messing with it and then failing, like, okay, that was not the right way to do this. Like putting stupid flooring. God, dude. And then you learn after the fact, as long as you're paying attention to it and someone's just not telling you like, hey, you need, like, go sit in this stand. Go, like, you know, we all had that probably growing up from whoever, whether it was your dad, your uncle, so whoever took you hunting as a kid. It was a lot of like, just go do this, go sit there. But you don't really learn a whole bunch until you either get to the point where you're kind of doing your own, or you start asking the questions why, and they try to start explaining. And some people have better mentors than others about explaining, well, why are we doing this? Instead of just go sit in that stand, you'll go kill one. Like we had a guy on one of the Hunters Hangout meetings on Patreon this past, it was one of these past ones we had, and he brought that up, that when he grew up hunting, and he's a younger guy, that it was just people telling him, hey, go sit in this area. If you sit there long enough, you're going to kill deer. Like, I've killed deer there. And that's how he killed majority of all of his bucks. Well, now he's like trying to do it himself. And it's like, it was great because I killed a lot of deer, but I didn't really get anything out of it because there was no like either two-way conversations or me even thinking or him thinking about, well, why did I kill that deer? Like, why was that deer coming through here? It was just like, oh, this is a spot someone's really had for a long time. They've learned it. And if I just go sit there, I'll go kill one. And now he's trying to relearn, like, yeah, he's killed deer, but he's trying to learn it on his own now about how can I find my own spots. And he's like, that's the big learning curve he's trying to work through. And I think that's a really big thing when it comes to deer hunting. Because I think everybody probably knows people that have killed deer, and maybe they just grew up with a really good family that, like, maybe they didn't even have great property, but they had someone in their family that was a really good mentor, and they would just go take them hunting, and they killed a lot of deer that way. And the second they're on their own, it is like starting over completely. And I think that's like the big aspect of asking why and kind of thinking through the process of why you're not having success when you're doing your own. I just think is what will speed up that process and help also apply what you're learning from a podcast potentially of figuring out like what actually works for them and building that confidence level.
So when I was younger, my dad, he basically he showed me scrapes, he showed me rubs, and he was like, if you walk up on a rub, you know, the buck, he was facing this way when he made it. He showed me tracks. And he was like, all right, you're ready to go hunting. And I'm like, well, how do I kill these big bucks like you do? And he's like, you'll have to figure that out on your own, son. And I was like, why? And he's like, it'll mean more to you if you figure it out on your own. And that's kind of stuck with me throughout the years. Like my youngest son, he's a big athlete. He likes to hunt too. So I'm kind of doing him the same way that my dad did me. I show him stuff, and I'm like, hey, you know everything you need to know now. You know, you can kill some deer. But I think that's the biggest reason, like with friends and family and stuff like that I'm kind of that way, because my dad was that way with me. Because There was one time I was like 19 years old, and I found this deer on this property, and we both could hunt it. And I was telling him about it, and I would come and ask him, and he would give very little, like,
Very vague.
yes. I mean, he wouldn't tell me nothing, but he would be like, I'm going to give you to like December, and if you don't kill it, I'm going to go up there and kill it. So sure enough, this deer, the way that found him, didn't know it till after he killed it. Its rack was broke off, and it had like splinters. Well, I found these rubs that was up to my head, and I was like, there's an elk up there. I found the biggest. I got a state record on this property, Dad. And he's like, yeah. So I'm like hunting him. And at the time, the job I worked, it was like you'd work 3 days, you was off 3 days, like that. So I only got to hunt like a weekend, like every like week and a half. So I could go some during the week. Come to find out, me and him was in the same area hunting, and we was probably like 80 yards apart. And he killed him one evening, and I didn't. And after that, I was like, I got to figure this out, because he ragged me. Oh, it was so bad. He's like, you had all this time to figure this deer out, And he did that in a parenting way to kind of instill, like, hey, if you want to do this, you'll never forget this. You'll do everything you can to figure out what these deer are doing. And it just kind of like a competition, or, made it more competitive. And ever since then, it's just stuck with me. If I find something that interests me, especially like a deer, I'm going to try and find every little nook, cranny that I can find to be able to take that deer.
I want to talk more about your dad. What was your dad's hunting style like?
Old school. He hunted from daylight to dark. When I was a kid, I would go places I had no idea where I was at, because he dropped me off before daylight, and he's like, if you kill one, shoot an arrow 3 times at 11 o'clock, and I'll be back around here to get you. If not, I'll see you at dark.
Shoot an arrow or shoot your gun?
Gun.
Okay.
I didn't even know that you could bow hunt till I was 19 years old.
That sounds like some Alabama stuff.
So,
that's how a lot of people are.
We always squirrel hunted, rabbit hunted, small game.
Same.
And that's what I grew up doing. And then all I knew was gun season. And then a cousin called me one time, and he's like, man, you getting ready for bow season? I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, man, you can hunt deer like a month and a half before gun season. And I'm like, I'm going to buy a bow right now, And, man, I went through the whole thing. I bought a bow, a climbing stand, because, like, my dad, we hunted off the ground. Growing
really?
up, I never even knew what a tree stand was till I was 19. And, man, it's so different now, like with the clothes. I had to wear them old waffle thermals, and you'd put all these clothes on, and we would walk forever, and you would get to sweating, and then when you put your coveralls on, you'd freeze to death. And I didn't have a backpack. He gave me a fanny pack with like some beanie weenies and some crackers and a Pepsi, and he's like, here you go, son, good luck, And it was fun, though, man. Those are some of the most enjoyable memories I have of hunting with him and his buddies. Man, we would go up there. They had like a cabin on the mountain, and them guys would grill chicken and just play cards and stuff. And they would teach a young kid stuff that they probably shouldn't be teaching him, I also learned a very valuable lesson. What happens in deer camp stays in deer camp, because both my parents worked, and my grandma kept me. So I went up there, one weekend with them hunting and stuff, and I come back, and I'm like, Grandma, look at this. I had like $40, a tape measure, a pocket knife. And she's like, well, how'd you get that? And I was like, I was rolling dice. That was not a good idea to tell Grandma about rolling dice. So I got a whooping. She took all my stuff from me, and then she said something to my dad, and he was like, hey, I hope you learned something from this. What happens at deer camp stays at deer camp, and that's kind of stuck with me.
So I want to talk even more about your dad and like some of his buddies and stuff, like all of his hunting buddies that he spent time with. You said like old school hunting off the ground, gun hunters. What did he do scouting wise? Like, how did he like learn an area? Like, talk a little bit about like his woodsmanship skill sets from back then. Again, when there was no technology like we have today. Like, what was he doing back then?
So basically, he would find sign and he would hunt it. And if you didn't see a deer, that's nighttime sign. is basically what I come up with. Like I said, he was tight-lipped on the secrets. But I also have 2 brothers, and they've killed some good bucks too, and they pretty much told me the same thing, like, hey, he done us the same exact way. He didn't really – he showed us the basics and everything, then it's like you're on your own. Mm-hmm. But he would basically leave that cabin, and he would walk. And if he found a good place to – with some good sign, he'd sit down, hunt for a couple hours, and if he got tired of it, he'd get up and walk to another spot. And back in those days, the way they told me, you didn't have to have permission. If you knew the people, you didn't have written permission. They would just, you can go hunt our property. So you could walk thousands of acres, and it wasn't a problem or anything. So he really just got out and done the footwork and, basically found the best sign he could find. Basically, they just sit over and hunt. If you seen the deer, as good. If not, hey, move on to the next place.
What was his buddies like, his hunting buddies?
Crazy. They would kill. He was more consistent than they were. They all killed good deer, but like they would go and they would hunt, a couple hours. They'd come back to the cabin. He left before daylight. He'd come back at dark unless he killed something. That was just his mentality. They would hunt a couple hours, they didn't see nothing, I'm hungry, I'm going back to get something to eat. So I think that was the biggest difference. They all killed good deer, but if there was a real good one, he would stick with it till he killed it.
And when you say a real good one, of course, it wasn't trail cameras back then. It was just finding sign, finding tracks, and then maybe getting an observation of the deer. So, and you were telling us a story, and I want you to tell the story again. You said it before we started the podcast about when you were 10, and it was the worst butt whooping I think you've ever had. Because this kind of showcases like how hardcore your dad was. And that's kind of like what I'm getting out of this like conversation when we're talking about your dad and kind of like how he brought you up is this a super hardcore deer hunter, almost on the level, if not on the level of like some of these hardcore turkey hunters where like they don't talk about anything, like these old school guys. Like it's very tight lipped,
loose lips, sink ships.
Yeah. So what was like that like hunting with your dad, and like maybe walk us through that story?
He was a way better turkey hunter than he was deer hunter.
Really?
One of his friends, his basement is full of fans and beards. And I was like, wow, you've killed a ton of turkey. And he looked at me and was like, that's your daddy's. And I was like, wow. But so he would find a deer. And when I was growing up, like there's like 140s all through the house. So, I mean, all I ever saw was these big deer. And it's like, when I was a kid, it took me till I was like a teenager before I killed like a decent rat buck. I mean, I would see them and I'd get so nervous I couldn't even shoot them because, I mean, I was just mesmerized by what he killed, and I was trying to, kill one too, make him proud, But basically, he found this buck, and back in those days, the only times I really got to hunt was the 5 days in December where you could kill either sex. Because he is like, you don't want to go and sit for days and all you see is does and, a kid's going to want to shoot, So he found this buck and he told me, he's like, hey, we're going to go and this is what's going to happen. He's like, I'm going to put you down here off this ridge. And he's like, there's a saddle up there. And the wind's blowing a certain way. He said the wind's supposed to switch about 9 or 10 o'clock is what the weather says. When that wind switches, get ready because them deer's going to come off the mountain and he's going to come down here and you're going to shoot him. I'm like, okay. So, I'm sitting there and sure enough, the wind switches and it's like maybe 5 or 10 minutes I hear something and I look to my right and it looked like an elk coming off this mountain. He had like 5 does with him. He comes down there and he stops. I mean, he's like 40 yards in the wide open. And I mean, I'm like, oh God, and I pull up, I shoot. I probably hit a tree 3 miles to the left or so. I probably jerked so hard, there's no telling what happened. Well, he run out there and stopped. And after this point, I'm upset because I knew I didn't hit him. So I'm like bearing down, really, focusing, squeezing the trigger, nothing. Me and you was talking before, I had one of those Ruger 44 mag little carbine guns. Well, the shells that he got me a 300 grain jacketed hollow point. Well, it was a pistol cartridge. They don't like to eject out of those 44s. Well, when I tried shooting that deer again, the hull was hung up and he run off. Well, after my dad heard me shoot, sure enough, he comes, boy. He got him. He come down there and he's like, "Well, where was he at?" I was like, "The first time was right there, and I don't think I hit him." And he's like, "What happened?" I said, "He run over there, and I was finna shoot him, gun." We sitting there, and it's like 5 minutes. We hear another shot. Well, come to find out, another hunter down the mountain killed this deer, and it was like a big 9-point, scored in like mid 140s. I got a good butt whooping for that because he had found this deer, and he told me, he said, I could have killed him twice. And he's like, I done knew this deer so well, I wanted you to kill him. And then here a little snot-nosed 10-year-old, scared to death, see this thing. It looked like an elk, and it's just stuff like that, I never will forget that. I can promise you that.
Was that the biggest buck you'd ever seen to that point?
Yes.
So also, more kind of getting more into your dad. Was your dad a guy who like shoulder mounted a lot of deer, or did he Euro mount, just cut the racks off? What did he do?
So when he passed away, my mom was like, "Hey, you need to do something with all those horns in the garage." And I'm like, "Horns in the garage?" He had like, I don't know, there's probably 6 or 7 mounted in the house they was way better than 130. I know he had a couple 140s. So I go out there and there's like these big old like boxes. 2 of them would probably make up this right here, full of racks that he just cut them off, put them in a box. And I mean, a friend of mine built pool cues, and he would use the horns to make like joints and ferrules and butt caps, ivory. So I gave him those horns, and like it took him 5 years to go through all those racks before he used them all. And another thing, a lot of these horns, and I would have never known this if it wasn't for my friend that built the pool cues, you never know till you cut into a horn. You may think it's solid. A lot of them's porous, hollow in the middle. So, around the bases, you might be like, oh, this is a real good one. He cut it, and it's hollow on the inside. It's crazy. I'd never seen nothing like that till he showed me. He's like, some of them I can use, some of them I can't. The tines, he said, most of the time was solid, but like the main beams, a lot of them is hollow. So.
Interesting.
Yeah, kind of a weird non-hunting related fact.
Maybe that's one of the reasons you see so many broke up deer.
Do you have any insight as to how your dad learned how to deer hunt? I'm assuming he came up in the 70s, probably earlier in that 60s.
He was born in the early 40s, and he grew up on a farm, and squirrel hunted, rabbit hunted. He stayed in the woods. He run dogs. He actually worked for a farmer up in North Alabama, the Jones farm and everything. They was really big. So him and his dad worked for the Jones. And basically the Jones guy, Mr. Jones, he is the one that had the deer stalked in Jackson County up there in Paint Rock Valley. And he actually worked with that guy. And when they brought the deer in and everything, he told me, he said, man, they was no different from a cow. They put them out there in a big pasture, and he said they was just like bedded down and everything, milling around like a cow would. But every day that went by, they got a little more wilder, and then next thing you know, they're gone. They was there maybe 4 or 5 days, and then they just, ran off, and that's basically how the deer was stalked up there, because he told me for a long time, back in those days, if you saw a spike or something, you done something, and until they started stalking the deer, there wasn't like really, really good deer, But just growing up, I mean, it was hard times back then. If you wanted to eat, a lot of times you had to go out and kill it,
That's why I asked, because that's how my grandfathers were. That's how my dad was. Like when they were little, especially my grandfather, my grandparents, they didn't even hunt deer at all. My grandfather didn't kill a deer till he was like 71.
Oh, wow.
And my dad didn't kill a deer till he was probably in his 40s. And it's just because, especially where they're from Walker County, like Cordova area, and that area still doesn't have a ton of deer. But especially back then, there was not deer around. It's like you find a deer track, you like call your buddies and y'all go out there and look at it, like that kind of thing. And so a lot of those guys grew up, specifically guys that were born in the 30s, 40s, 50s. Those guys growing up, they're just like, wasn't any deer. except in certain parts of Alabama. So I always like to ask about that because they all kind of have a similar story. They're small game hunters that ended up transitioning into deer hunters. And talking to those guys, like we've been fortunate enough to be able to interview some people like that. And there's something different about them, man. They're killers.
Yes.
It's just a different breed. They're cut from a different cloth, I guess.
Like I can remember in the summertime, because he farmed a lot when he was younger and everything. He knew all these farmers. We would ride around and shoot groundhogs in fields, and it was nothing for him to prop up on the hood of his old S15 truck and shoot a groundhog a couple of 100 yards out in his field. And they just love, for us to do it because, there's eating their crop up, But we done that for years, just riding around shooting groundhogs and stuff like that. And I think that's a lot of the reason, like, everybody has like a particular skill set as far as like shooting guns, bows, stuff like that. I think the reason why I'm able to do what I've done is because when I was younger, we shot a lot of guns. We shot like groundhogs and went to turkey shoots with shotguns. And there was guys that used to shoot 22s and stuff, and we would go on the weekends. I mean, we was always doing something,
What's a turkey shoot?
So basically, you'll go to a place and they'll have a target up out there at 40 yards, and you'll bring your shotgun and they give you the shells. And you can only have a choke that say if you're using a 12 gauge, that a 20 gauge shell will go down in. Everybody shoots at 40 yards at like a pin dot, and whatever's closest to the pin dot pellet wins like a ham or a turkey or something like that.
Okay. The one other thing kind of about your dad, I'm just interested because I didn't grow up with someone like this that had, like, I grew up home with my uncles. My dad doesn't hunt. And it's fascinating when you have somebody who's like that much of a woodsman who had that much experience, because like when you were really getting into hunting, say like 10, 12, like early teenage years, how old was your dad back then?
So my two brothers, one of them's 59, the other's 60. I'm 41. So when I was born, my dad was 40, my mom was 41. And everybody told me once I kind of got up in age, they're like, your dad doesn't hunt nothing like he used to. So he had slowed way down. So, I mean, I can remember like back then they wasn't no four-wheelers, nothing like that. They had Volkswagens. And they would take these up in the mountains, and I'd be in the front seat. And he's like, hold on to the guns, boy. And we'd be bouncing around, and he'd be spinning tires on slick rocks. And I'm like, please don't drop the gun, Just, it was different then. It's nothing like it was now because one of his brothers, me and him do a lot of turkey hunting together, my Uncle Bobby. And I love him to death because every time I look at him, it's like I'm looking at my dad, And he would tell me, like, side by side, he was like, man, if me and your daddy had these back in the day, there's no telling what all we could have done. They was just crazy about, hunting and stuff, and they just didn't have, stuff like that to help them and everything. Like if you killed one, the way they taught, it was like call 2 or 3 buddies, and they didn't quarter them up and pack them out. They gutted that thing and cut like a tree down and toted it out like the old people in the frontier days, or had it strapped to, I got pictures, Polaroid pictures, of like a big old buck strapped across the hood of a Volkswagen that they killed and everything. It's pretty cool.
Do they mod out those Volkswagens?
They would turn the transaxle up and put like big old mud tires and stuff on. Yeah, the tires look like this on the back of them. And they would mod out the engines and everything, man. It was crazy. Because
man.
The front end and everything, the hood, that was like your trunk.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most of the time what they killed, you couldn't put in there. So they just have it strapped across the front,
Oh, man. I'm going to need to see some of those pictures. That sounds awesome.
Oh, the big old Elvis sideburns and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Ain't a deer safe, man.
Yep.
You see sideburns coming in a Volkswagen.
What was when you were growing up, what was your dad's go-to hunting rifle?
Oh, he loved his guns, but he had a Woodsmaster 742 Super Deluxe with a Monte Carlo stock and everything. And when he passed away, I hunted with that gun for years. And then I finally got to the point where I was like, I want to put it up, get something different. I don't want to beat it up or nothing like that.
What caliber?
30-06.
Okay. Yeah.
Classic.
Dude, automatic, baby.
Yes.
That's awesome. So, also, was there a culture back then with you growing up Was there any dog hunting up there or no?
No.
It was all-
Unless you like coon hunted or something, that was about it. Or, well, they would run squirrel dogs.
But no deer dogs. No. Okay. But you said your dad did that a little bit or not really because of that area of the state?
Oh, they rabbit hunt. They run dogs for squirrels, rabbits, all kinds of stuff. He told me one time when he was like 12 or 13, he had a squirrel dog, and squirrel was up in a tree, and it was like in a knot hole. Well, it could never get it out to kill it, and he's like, well, I'm going to climb up the tree. Well, he climbed up the tree, and he got on a limb that was rotted, fell out of the tree, and knocked himself out. And when he woke up, it was like dark, and the dog was with him. I mean, at different time, back then and everything. But, yeah, they run dogs a lot, as far as like rabbits, squirrels, stuff like that.
Yeah, small game.
That dog's like, you good?
Yeah.
Yeah, all snuggled up. Man, so, okay, well, let me ask, how different is your Uncle Bobby compared to your dad, as in, like, hunting style and, like, what he used to do? Or probably doesn't do it as much now, but growing up, was he similar to your dad?
He wasn't as hardcore. They all, like I told y'all before, like when we have Thanksgiving, it's like a hunter's meetup. Everybody's showing trail camera pictures or talking about a buck they're hunting or something like that. But everybody hunted, but he just didn't hunt like he did. I don't know if it was, maybe he didn't have the desire, but he also had 5 kids too. So that might have been a lot of it too.
Well, Andrew, do you have any questions about his dad? Because I want to.
No, I don't.
Okay, so one thing, kind of getting off your dad, unless, actually, I'll take it back. Do you got another good hunting story about you and your dad growing up, or any deer that he killed like that?
I do remember one time I got to go hunting with him, and this really, it stuck with me. We was hunting on the very top of a mountain, and he loved to get as far off from the sign, like if a deer was traveling through a certain way, he'd get 2 or 3 benches up the mountain. He would find somewhere where he could shoot him 150 yards away or 200 yards away where he didn't even know that he was being hunted. So we was hunting a spot, and he was hunting a deer. And I was kind of watching one side of this point, and he was on the other. And I remember looking over there, and I see him, reaching for his gun, and he gets it, and he shoulders it, and I'm like, oh, it's finna happen, I see this. He puts the gun up, looks around, and I'm like, why is he not losing his crap right now? Like, what's going on? So I seen the buck come on around the mountain, and it was like about 100-inch 8-point, something like that. And that wasn't the one that we was hunting, and he told me, like, you shoot that, another butt whooping. So I wasn't going to shoot that deer. So after that, I asked him, and he's like, son, I could have killed that deer. And I was like, but you didn't. He said, for me, when I raised that gun up, put them crosshairs on him, and squeezed that trigger on safety, he's like, that was a dead deer. He's like, I killed that deer. That's all I needed. Put his gun back up and kept on hunting, and that just kind of, he was different about that. But I'd have pushed safety off and shot him, and got a butt whooping.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, I want to kind of get back to you on this, and what gets you excited for this upcoming season? About, all the work you put in, the data, all that information. What kind of gets you excited?
I like finding like a particular deer. You go through stages. You like have the killing stage and then the trophy stage and stuff like that. For me, don't get me wrong. I like shooting them. I love to eat them, but I like to find a particular buck and just figure him out and, track him down and get him. And like having a buck on camera that I know that, hey, I'm going to try and get this one next year. That's what helps me, get through turkey season in the summer and everything, knowing like, hey, if he's still there, I'm going to be after him come, October the 15th. And I do have one picked out. So he would probably be the buck that I would have the most camera history on. And if he makes it to next year, he was an 8-point, and he was really wide. He was probably 17, 18 inches wide. And I got a couple pictures of him. Next thing I know, next picture, his main beam's like snapped off. So something broke him up pretty good. Well, this year he's a 10-point. He still is wide, but the 9-point with the big hooks, he's got those on both sides. So he's you would know him if you saw him. That's another thing with the cameras. It kind of helps me like identify different deer because y'all know I'm pretty sure it's the same way. A lot of times when you see these deer, you have like just a couple of seconds. It's like either shoot or you ain't going to make it happen. So I'm always, if there's one I'm hunting, I'm trying to look for, like this one, it was the kickers on the G2s. This one, it was the G4s. The 8-point, it was that his G3s was longer than his G2s. So it was like, as soon as I seen that, it went away from observation. It's like, let's get it done. It's kill time.
That's awesome. Well, like that's one thing kind of gets you excited. I think everybody gets excited about next season. To me, that's the one thing about running cameras is you really get to know what, especially if you leave cameras out just after season, what made it, and have that to be looking forward to for the next season.
Well, with this wide 8-point right here that I killed, after season, I had like 2 or 3 bucks. It was better than him, and man, I was all excited. But that particular year that I killed that deer, it was a good acorn crop. Well, this year wasn't a good acorn crop, and that's another thing from the trail camera data that you'll have deer in areas, like say it's a good acorn area. You will still have deer use it when there's no acorns, but those good deer, they're not in there like they are the years with the acorn crop. And to me, I think that has a lot to do with my success because I didn't know it, but I was trying to make myself better during bow season, finding all these feed trees, and come to find out those trees play a big part in the season. If it's a good season and you find where they're concentrated at, it's on. But if it's a bad season, you may have had all kinds of pictures of this buck in here. If he don't have nothing to eat, and it's not the rut, he's not going to be there. He's going to be somewhere else feeding.
One last thing I want to get your take on. Do you document where you find doe groups at to kind of, you mentioned early on in this conversation about, traditionally you've been just a big rut hunter, which I would say 90%, 95% of at least Alabama hunters are like that. And do you pay any attention of like where you see doe groups either on camera or whatever and drop pins on to kind of know when and where you ought to hunt based off those does?
Yes, 100%. If you follow those does around throughout the season, when it comes rut time, you know where them bucks is going to be. Onyx and everything made that a lot easier. Hunt stand, whatever you use, Spartan Forge, it makes it a lot easier. If you know where the food is, you can follow them around because like the years it's spotty, if the does is here, and then once they're not here, you know the other areas to go to check and see if they're there.
And that's all based off boot leather, scouting and understanding where the next food source is that they're going to shift to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep. I was trying to do a little bit of that this season. We'll see how it turns out this past season. Do you have any parting piece of advice for everyone listening to the podcast right now who listens to a deer hunting podcast every week and they're trying to get better? What's one just solid piece of advice you can give them going into preparation for deer season 2025?
Scout more than you hunt.
I love it.
I would, like a friend of mine, he told me this years ago, and I took it to heart. He would scout 3 days before he hunted, and whatever the best sign he found in those 3 days, that's where he would go and hunt at.
I like it.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Brandon, we'll wrap up on this. I appreciate you coming down and doing the podcast with us. And, we got deer season 2025. So, lots to look forward to. So I appreciate you coming down and spend some time with us, showing us some of the deer you've killed. And I appreciate you sharing also the stories about your dad. I love having conversations like that because this is so cool to kind of see insight into what it was like being surrounded by someone like that. It's a true woodsman. So that's super killer. But for all the audio listeners and video listeners out there, appreciate y'all watching and listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, go leave us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts if you're an audio listener. If you're a video viewer, leave us a comment down below, kind of what you liked about it, and stay tuned for more deer content coming out later this year. So appreciate y'all watching. Thank y'all for listening. We'll catch you back on the next episode from the Southern Outdoorsman podcast. And remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.